One of my earliest business attempts was a mobile payment startup. My co-founder and I spent over 2.5 years working on getting it going. And I cannot even count how many times I would stay up until 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning preparing for a big meeting or a presentation or a pitch. Eventually, we did get our first round of funding for multiple 6 figures, but ultimately, we failed. Walking away from that startup was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. And for the longest time, it felt like one of the biggest failures of my life. I had put in so much time, so much blood, sweat, and tears, and so much of my own money as well. And for a really long time, I did not think I was ever going to have it in me to try again at building a business. How did I ultimately recover from that, and how long did it take? That's what we're going to talk about today. Long before I started on my entrepreneurial journey, though, I have to tell you, I had wanted to be an entrepreneur. I mean, everyone makes it sound so sexy, right? You get to be in control of your life. You get to do something amazing. You get to make all this amazing income. Why wouldn't you want to be one? Now, I'd read about successful entrepreneurs talking about all the failures that they'd had to overcome, but I just didn't get it at the time. Because honestly, even reading about all their failures, it still felt like they had it relatively easy. So when I started failing, I remember thinking, why did everyone else have it so much easier than me? That was a huge reason why it took me so long to get over my failures. And ultimately, honestly, a huge reason why it took me so long to eventually succeed. Of course, it was absolutely worth it, but if there's one thing I could do, it's give the information I'm about to share with you to my former self so that I'd be able to move past failures a lot faster and ultimately succeed a lot faster. That's why in today's video, I'm gonna share with you 4 tips that actually work to help you overcome that fear of failure and actual failure to make sure that you are able to ultimately succeed and hopefully much faster too. So starting with tip number 1, which is a little unconventional because as I mentioned, that failure was truly devastating. My confidence was completely shattered and I honestly thought I would never have the confidence to try again at building a business. My own bank account also took a big hit and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, have I just screwed myself over for the rest of my life financially? I honestly did not know if I would recover mentally, physically from all that sleep deprivation, emotionally, and financially. I tried so many things. I read so many books and self-help and, nothing worked. So, you know what I did? I just gave myself time. This is really unconventional advice, but it's what worked for me. So I found myself a job that felt fun and exciting, that paid well, and I let myself enjoy it. There's a lot of advice out there that says you have to always be going for your goals, and it's not okay if you take some time off. You know what? If you need that permission, I'm giving it to you. Sometimes if you just want to kind of recover, take it easy, enjoy life a little bit, that's absolutely okay. And honestly, doing that was one of the most powerful things for helping me rebuild my confidence and eventually be able to get back at it. But before I could, I also had to do something else. I had to first reframe the meaning that I had been giving that failure. One day, I had this huge aha moment when I was reading an interview by Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, where she shared that growing up as a kid, something her father did at the dining table every day was to encourage her and her brothers to share one thing that they had failed at. And she said that that was one of the most important things my dad could have taught me because it taught us that if you weren't failing, you weren't trying big enough or hard enough. I remember reading that and thinking, whoa. And then I pictured how my parents might have acted in that situation because I grew up in a really typical Asian household where you were taught that you either succeeded or you failed. It was like the whole typical meme, you either get an A+ or you failed. Realizing how Sarah's dad had taught her to think about failure helped me realize that it can be a normal thing. In fact, instead of thinking about failure as a negative thing, you can think about it as something that is a sign that you are going for your dream. So then how good is that? So from that moment on, I started thinking, okay, so if this failure wasn't such a horrible thing, then what did it mean? What did it teach me? What did I learn from it? How did I grow from it? That's when I started realizing, oh, it wasn't such a big failure. Yes, the business didn't ultimately take off, but look how much I learned. I learned how to actually run a real business. I learned how to think really big and strategically in terms of business strategy, marketing, sales, how to get really big business partners. And possibly most importantly, I learned what I did not want to do the next time I tried again at business. First of all, I learned that I am not a fan of risk because the stories about people who take risks make it sound so sexy, but you know what? Risk is only sexy when it pays off, which is a very small percentage of the time. And so I want to stay away from risk as much as possible. And I also learned that I don't care how much funding you have, how big your plans are. If you are not making sales, you do not have a business. So the next business I was going to do, I was going to monetize it from day one somehow. Spoiler alert, those were huge factors in my next down the road business venture. So as I started realizing that made me feel a little less bad about the 2.5 years that I thought I had wasted and totally failed at. But I was just feeling kind of neutral at this point. I still wasn't fully believing that I could actually do it. So I had to replace all my doubts and fears with positive thoughts and belief and proof that the things that I wanted to do were possible. And I did that in what I still think is the best and easiest way possible by surrounding myself with the people who had done the things that I wanted to do. Now, let's be clear. I did not personally know anyone who had done any of the things that I wanted to do. Build a big business, create amazing impact and revenue and freedom and flexibility. What do you do when that's the case? How do you surround yourself with people when you don't actually know anyone? You know what? Thank goodness for social media, because that is what I use to find them, to read their posts, their stories, their updates, and really absorb the way they were living their life and the reality that they had of the things that I wanted to do and have. And for me, this was years ago. So Instagram, TikTok, they weren't even really around. Nowadays, it's even easier with people sharing their day-to-day stories on Instagram, their fun reels, TikToks, images, for you to really find people who have done the things that you want to do and really absorb that, okay, they were able to create this. Okay, you know what? Maybe I can too. Down the road, I even hired some of them to teach me the things that they had done. But that's another story for another day. So I was starting to believe that I could do it again. But you know what? Believing is one thing, being motivated to take action is a whole other thing. And I was struggling with that motivation again because I still had a little bit of that fear that I was going to fail. I mean, it'd been 2 years since I tried again. Things were good. I didn't want to rock the boat. I wasn't 100% happy at my job, but it was fun. My coworkers were great. I was being paid really well. And things were good enough. So I'd dabble in starting a business again. I'd maybe put up my website or work on it one day and then take a month off. Or I would try and connect with a potential client, get a rejection, and then take 2 months off. Or when I felt really scared to show up and share my information on social media, I would let myself be scared and not do it. So as you can imagine, that is not how you succeed at building a business. I didn't know when I was going to find that motivation, but then something crazy happened to me. In the span of a year, all of my loved ones had something life-threatening happen to them. My mother was diagnosed with cancer. My father collapsed on the floor and had to be rushed to the ER for heart surgery that has a really low percentage of success. And my sister almost lost her eyesight in this freak snowball accident. And the recovery times for these things are really long. It happened over a year. So I didn't have enough vacation days to just take off a year and be with my family. And each of those times when I had to leave my mom, say goodbye to my dad, leave my sister sitting in the dark because I couldn't stay with her, it created this buildup in me that, you know what? It doesn't matter how okay things are in your job. If you can't be in control to be there for your loved ones when they need you most, what the heck is the point of all of this? And so that finally gave me the motivation I'd been lacking to get serious. I couldn't find that motivation for myself. Even thinking about the income, the freedom, and the flexibility, it was nice, but things were good enough. So I had to find what would really motivate me. And that motivation is different for each of us. Once you find that, that is what you go back to every single time these fears come up. You feel a little unmotivated because it will just light a fire under you. And that was the starting point. Because with that, after getting serious, after taking that time to recover, after taking the lessons I learned from my failures, ultimately, guess what? I was able to take my job skills at the time, build my first online business, and replace my income before I turned in my notice. And now fast forward about 7 years, I understand that failure is just a part of the process. And the thing is, once you stop fearing failure, you become unstoppable. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't fail a lot. In fact, just yesterday, I failed at something that I wanted to do. I told myself I was gonna be more consistent on social media, and I told myself I was gonna post a great piece of content yesterday, and I didn't. I was going to, but life got in the way. I ended up not feeling like it, and so that was definitely a failure in terms of consistency. I know this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially newer entrepreneurs, struggle with. So if you do struggle with being consistent in your business and failing at that, make sure that you go and watch this video right now where I take you behind the scenes of how I was able to be consistent on social media and creating content in my business every day for a week.